Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is the Quarter 2 webinar for the Affordable Solar and Storage Pre-Development and Technical Assistance Solicitation, or Pre-Development Program for short. My name is Dylan Cunningham, and I'm an Assistant Project Manager on the New York Sun team here at NY-SARTA. And today I'm joined by Chris Rogers, also on the New York Sun team and lead of the Pre-Development Program. Before we get started, I'd like to note some webinar housekeeping. Today, everyone will remain muted during the webinar. If you have any questions or comments, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom right-hand side of WebEx, and we will answer questions at the end of the webinar. We are also recording today's webinar, and we'll post that as well as the presentation slides to the pre-development program webpage for your reference afterwards. We will send a follow-up email with that information when it is available, and that typically takes a few days, but no more than a week. And before I hand it over to Chris, I would just highly encourage everyone to take a look at the presentation slides after they are posted, because the last several slides have information about other NYSERDA programs and resources for multifamily buildings outside of this pre-development program. And lastly, to provide some background, we started this quarterly webinar series with the intent of creating an open and ongoing platform to share information and answer questions about the pre-development program with interested stakeholders. So today we will start with an overview of the program, followed by program updates, supported activities, and how to apply. Then we'll end with time to address questions and answers and a reminder about future webinars. So now I'll hand it over to Chris, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dylan. So I guess we can go forward a couple of slides, starting with kicking things off with the program overview. For those who are not familiar, the New York Sun program, within which the pre-development program is part of, is the overall state of, or the NYSERDA program that focuses on solar or resources for new grid-connected solar projects. The New York Sun program has been expanded a few times in recent years, most notably impacting the pre-development program, the Affordable Solar Storage Pre-Development Technical Assistance Program, is the Solar Energy Equity Framework, which is the overall list of programs and funding that are supporting projects that are targeting disadvantaged communities, which is a key part of the Climate Act legislation. There's the overall goal of installing 10 gigawatts of distributed solar capacity by 2030. The Solar Energy Equity Framework works towards the overall goal of providing a minimum benefits of 35% to disadvantaged communities and really targeting 40% of those benefits. It includes the pre-development program. Next slide. Which will be, we're working towards an update on the official solicitation. We are anticipating that in light of the overall goal of installing 10 gigawatts of distributed capacity of solar by 2030, applications for the pre-development program will pretty much be accepted up to that endpoint of 2030, setting it at 2029 with the goal of having projects completed before we hit that 2030 deadline. The overall program, in a nutshell, it provides grants up to $200,000. Those are scaled to the scope of the overall benefits in terms of the number of projects, installed capacity, whether that be solar in terms of kilowatts or megawatts, or if there's going to be a storage component in terms of kilowatt hours or megawatt hours, focusing on owners and managers of affordable housing, whether that be multifamily or portfolios of single family housing that are really targeting community-led projects, community-based organizations, local housing authorities or government entities that have direct connections to affordable housing. It's really focused on driving community-led projects and helping these organizations to find the appropriate level of technical assistance that they can move those projects forward with a wide range of early stage planning activities. Next slide. And I'll just add there that projects are accepted from across the state of New York, whether you be in PSEC, Long Island service territory, if you're located within a municipal electricity service territory, if you are in the state of New York, that is your community-based organization, your housing authority, your affordable housing manager. If you are operating in the state of New York, then that's typically the type of project that would be targeted, or organization that would be targeted for this grant program. The applications are accepted on a calendar quarterly basis, the next deadline coming up at the end of the month, which is a key part of why we've been continuing to have these webinars, to make sure that this program remains on top of mind, to let people know that we are continuing to support it. There is funding that is still available for these grant projects, and we're still working towards the backlog of projects for existing applications, but we are still accepting new applications. There is new funding that is going out for new solar and storage projects that meet the overall project or criteria. The next slide. This next slide is really just showing what the overall calendar quarterly timeline, what it will be. This is going through the end of the year in terms of the webinars and the submission dates, but you could project this out to the end of 2029, and we will continue to do these webinars to make sure that folks are aware that the program still exists, that NYSERD is still supporting these projects, and that funding remains available. Next slide, I wanted to talk through some key terms that if you are considering submitting an application under this program, if you're wondering whether or not your intended solar and storage project would apply, a key part is regulated affordable housing. In the state of New York, that's typically projects that are supported by one of the programs that are listed on this slide here. Typically, this involves multifamily housing buildings that have income-based restrictions and detailed criteria for tenants. That can be from local entities and agencies, like in New York City, there's housing preservation and development, or that can be a range of organizations that are supported across the state by New York State Homes and Community Renewal. They could be supported federally from Housing and Urban Development. They could be supported through even agencies that a lot of folks don't think about, such as USDA, through their different programs. It's essentially, when we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about projects that are properties where it is clear that there's income-based criteria, typically at around 80% of the area median income that governs these projects, and you're seeking to develop a solar storage project directly on those properties. That's typically the sort of affordable housing that we're thinking of. Next slide. And the type of work that gets supported under this program is typically in finding a technical service provider, which could be a wide range of organizations. There are different types of community-based organizations that provide support to affordable housing in a range of ways, but it can also be different types of firms, whether those firms are focused on architecture, housing design and development, or engineering, who are working in partnership. That is, that there is already something in place that shows that you are working with a manager of affordable housing. If you are one of these more technical service providers and you're seeking, or you're thinking about submitting a grant application, it's really incumbent upon you to show that you're not trying to use the grant program to sort of subsidize your outreach to different affordable housing managers, that there's already a relationship in place, and you're seeking to use the grant funding to support I guess I would say the manager of affordable housing. The most, I guess, in the prototypical type of grant program, you have a manager of affordable housing that is using the funding to find technical service providers as well, as opposed to the other way around, where there is a technical service provider who does not have a direct connection to affordable housing, to low to moderate income households, to disadvantaged communities within the state of New York already, and seeks funding, I guess, before that sort of step has been achieved. Next, I wanted to talk through some program updates, and I think we're gonna have to update this presentation so that I can provide the links. But what I wanted to focus on was recent guidance that came from HUD that impacts multifamily housing. For those who may be aware, there's this I guess a subsidy known as the utility allowance, which has been an issue for communities. Previously, there have been lack of guidance on how the utility allowance which was a subsidy from HUD, would be impacted by community solar projects. It's also unclear how, although HUD was generally supportive, what the impact of solar installations on HUD supported properties would be in terms of their calculation of the overall benefits, calculation of income, and the annual assessments that HUD performs. And so HUD recently put out guidance specifically focused on multifamily housing and community solar projects and master metered buildings, and these type of benefits that a manager or an operator of a solar project may provide that will not be counted as part of annual income. There's a fairly long list of different activities that are essentially, HUD has clarified, would not be considered part of the annual income calculation. That includes job training, workforce development. That could include facility upgrades in terms of energy efficiency upgrades to the building. That could include some more broad activities like financial literacy programs or wellness programs, as well as expanding shuttle services and certain types of community events. And so, before we upload this, I didn't want to put a long hyperlink in this sort of presentation, but when we upload the presentation slides to our website, you'll be able to click through that. Also, I can, maybe before the presentation goes, I can put the link to that in the chat. If you reach out after the presentation at some point, I'm happy to share that. But essentially, there is guidance as to the type of activities that you can provide, and largely what HUD is saying is that a lot of the activities or benefits coming from solar would not be considered part of annual income, which is great news, and they've published that guidance. And so now, I guess for those who've been working on this very specific issue, who've been concerned about utility allowance, who've been concerned about annual income calculations, HUD has sort of put that issue to bed in addition to other guidance. That's not directly part of the pre-development program, except that the vast majority of grants under this program have focused on multifamily housing, and it's an issue that has come up in past grant applicants where they've sort of had to navigate this issue in the absence of guidance. There's now that guidance there. The other update, which we'll get into in a couple slides, is I wanted to, or a little later, talk about the current state of the non-residential incentives which would impact multifamily housing in the Con Edison region. Next slide. Just want to touch briefly on the Inflation Reduction Act. So there was some guidance that came out in February about there are certain categories that increase the overall investment tax credit, and which is now set at 30%, which increases to either 40% or 50%, depending on whether or not it qualifies in one of these four categories listed below, as well as guidance as to the total nationwide capacity for the number of projects that can go on under there. So that there hasn't been any update, but it sounds like there will be further guidance as to that will clarify eligibility for these separate categories. As of right now, the low-income residential building project, which would represent an additional 20% bonus or adder tax credit, so raising the total investment tax credit to 50%. There isn't very detailed guidance as to what is a low-income residential building project and how you qualify or how you establish that you're meeting the minimum benefits. There's some hope that we will receive that guidance in the future, but we're going to, or at NYSERDA, we're going to continue to, I guess, put this reminders in here that the Inflation Reduction Act represented a significant sea change for affordable housing projects, in that there is this added, basically there are increased adders for all projects that would likely be applying for grants under this program. If by definition, if you are seeking pre-development grant funding, you ought to be either a low-income community project or a low-income residential building project, and if you're or a qualified low-income economic benefit project, that there seems to be a one-to-one. And whereas before the total investment tax credit was at 26%, and you had to kind of do some financial judo in order to get that. There is also the introduction of direct payment for nonprofits, which would include housing authorities and a range of organizations that makes this far more accessible. And so you ought to be, if you haven't worked out the financials of how this would work into your overall project planning, it should be a key part of how you're thinking about how these projects will work. Next slide. The next thing I just wanted to highlight. So for those who are focused in the Con Edison region, there were increased base incentives for projects that were basically small commercial projects or multifamily housing projects. Occasionally, under this program, folks will attempt to site a community solar project that will then benefit low to moderate income or disadvantaged communities, different households across the community, which is an eligible project under this program. And right now, for projects under 200 kilowatts, which is again fairly common under this program, the baseline incentive, if it is not built directly on or multifamily affordable housing, is $1.20. But that block is likely closing, which will soon step down to $1. And so if you are, I guess if you're working on a project now that is not close to interconnection, you should again adjust your planning that those incentives for your project. Again, this is just within the Con Edison region, will likely be dropping. If your project is regulated multifamily affordable housing, this is less of a major consideration because that incentive is fixed at either $2 a watt or $1.60 a watt, and that will automatically adjust to stay the same. But if you're looking at a project in Con Edison that will be located, I don't know, perhaps on a spare warehouse somewhere, I would encourage you to check out make sure that you're monitoring the incentive dashboard for so that you're aware that this drop in incentive is coming, and that you sort of roadmap out what the future blocks will be, which we have here. It's dropping from $1.20 to $1. Block 3 will be down at 80 cents a watt. Next slide. And this is sort of a recap for the incentives that all projects that are built on multifamily affordable housing or regulated affordable housing across the state. This is the incentive structure. So essentially, if it's in the Con Edison region, you're looking at either $1.60 a watt or $2 a watt. If you're in the Long Island region or the upstate region, the project will receive $1 a watt. That is up to the first 200 kilowatts of the project. All capacity in excess of that. Again, this is for projects that are just sited directly upon multifamily affordable housing buildings. Those will receive the current non-residential block incentive. So on the previous slide, if you're or I guess you don't, and Dylan, you have to go back. So an example would be if a project was 250 kilowatts in Con Edison, if it was community solar, it would get $2 a watt for the first 200 kilowatts, and it would get $1 a watt for the remaining 50 kilowatts of the overall project. But we again, similar to the Inflation Reduction Act considerations, that slide, we'll continue to have this summary. There is also a solar multifamily housing page on our website that contains the same information, but it's just something to keep handy if you're wondering, what will be the solar incentives, what will the subsidy be for my project, which again should be really very relevant for projects that are seeking funding under this program. So next slide, we'll talk through supported activities under this program. So this is really, again, this is another slide to keep handy if you're considering submitting an application. These are about the most common activities that are supported and they're also eligible for support under this grant program. It's typically early stage development where there are entities that you're in a phase where you're interested in developing a solar or storage project, but you're not sure what the overall business model will be. What will be the ownership structure? who's going to get involved, where can you build it, is there enough space? That when you're doing this sort of preliminary site assessment work, you're looking at, what's the area of the roof, what's the condition of the roof, if it's solar, do I have an unobstructed view of the southern sky? And so these are the sort of activities that most common are pretty much involved in every single pre-development grant application. Next slide. There are other activities that you will also see depending on how expansive you want to get in terms of, for community solar projects. Outreach and engagement is a really big challenge for finding projects, and that sort of that leads to that, I guess, that uncertainty in terms of outreach leads to challenges in terms of securing financing, and who is going to fund this project. Once we figure out our model, how are we going to pay for it? Are we going to be able to get the adequate amount of debt? How are we going to raise that? Again, that's the sort of type of activities that will be relevant. Less common, but it's something that we try to highlight are, while this grant program is focused on solar and storage developments, oftentimes project teams are seeking they're not just focused on solar and storage. There's a holistic approach. They're looking at the overall resiliency, energy efficiency, and different sort of benefits that they can provide to the communities, disadvantaged communities, environmental justice communities. We haven't seen a lot of projects that have come in that have focused on this side, but we would encourage you to, if this is something that you're thinking about doing, about not just focusing on that and incorporating other activities to describe how you're going to provide these broader benefits to environmental justice communities, that's also potentially eligible for funding. Next slide, we'll just talk through how you apply to the program. It's fairly straightforward. There's an online application process where there's we have the link, you're uploading your documents and attachments. There's a standard project form or project detail form where you fill out the description, who's involved in the project, what your intended plans are, as well as what is a sort of early draft of your work plan. You include those attachments along with other components that you feel would be that a review committee should look at. That those can be letters of recommendation from different community members. That can be documentation showing some of the work that's already been done. If you want to show that you've already secured the site, if you have a commitment, say, from a local business who says that we're committed to work in this way. If you're a technical service provider, this is where you would show that you have a partnership with a manager or an owner of affordable housing, or a community-based organization that works very closely with low to moderate income households or disadvantaged communities. And all of that gets submitted online, and that will be part of what will be shared with the review committee. Now with that out of the way, we'll jump into the Q&A portion, and we'll pause there to go through any questions that have come through in the chat, and then Dylan and I will go through those questions. So I saw a question in here, and maybe I'm hoping that you can add a little bit more detail on here. But the question is, assuming you have a relationship for an affordable housing project in place with one of the approved entities, can the pre-development funds support the affordable housing initiative, or do they only associate it with solar energy specific portion of the project? I just want to clarify that this question is when you say you have a relationship for, I guess, is that is that for building housing in general, and then is the clarity that would there have to be a solar project or a battery project? If that is the question, then yes, there should be a solar and or battery storage project in order to receive the funding. But if the question is more if it's something more broad than not the development of the housing portion, and maybe are you asking if you know, I guess if there's a solar and storage project on affordable housing that is also going to include maybe energy efficiency and workforce development, is I guess could you clarify whether or not you're talking about maybe a broad energy focused project, and you're wondering how those funds would apply, or is this a project that currently does not include solar or storage at all, and you're wondering if that would be eligible for funding? I guess I would just clarify that it should be, or I think that may have answered the question, but there should be a solar and storage project in addition to the basic requirements of working with affordable housing. Next question of, what qualifies as bulk purchasing for LMI customers? Is this only on individual projects, or could I apply to numerous smaller projects using the residential? It's a great question. So there have been, I think, so the focus is affordable housing. If you're in more urban areas of the state, that tends to be multifamily affordable housing. But we intentionally worded the definition of affordable housing to include portfolios of single family affordable housing. And so if there is an entity that operates multiple properties or buildings that are 1 to 4 family housing, they have income-based restrictions that are focused on low to moderate income customers. That's 80% of the area median income. Then you are correct that the base incentive, or I guess all of these projects, they're eligible for the base New York Sun incentives. And so for single family, low to moderate income projects, they would be eligible for 80 cents a watt. So they would be eligible for that. But if you are working with an affordable housing provider that is managing that property, and you're exploring ways to, say, install a number of installations on that is potentially eligible for a pre-development funding, the focus would likely be on that entity that is managing the multiple single family or 1 to 4 family residential properties. I think where that falls into more of a gray area and likely would not be eligible is, say, if you're a solar installer or developer, and you do not have an affordable housing entity that is managing those properties, and you're seeking to subsidize maybe the installation of these properties, that likely would not be eligible. There would need to be that entity that is managing these multiple 1 to 4 family homes, and then is trying to find an entity, be it potentially like your organization, to install that. Or if you are part of it, an affordable housing organization, then that is managing smaller properties, then probably yes. Is there a limited number of applications that you can submit? The key part is that in each application should be, I guess I think when you're looking at the project applications are being reviewed, there's sort of, I guess you should be doing different activities. And I guess if your goal is to install I don't know, if you're representing an affordable housing organization, and they're seeking to develop a solar project on some of their properties, if there was an application that was submitted, and for, say, half of their properties, you wouldn't be able to get multiple bites at the apple to do the exact same thing again. You're really looking for, or the review committee is looking for, substantial, I guess distinction between new applications to award additional funding. And so if I guess if all of the entities involved are the same and the activities are the same, you know, I guess the goal of the project is to help community-based organizations on affordable housing to sort of identify a pathway towards going solar, but it's not necessarily intended to piecemeal, I guess, allow the same entity to apply for multiple grants to do the exact same activity multiple times over and over again. So I guess in a nutshell, you're allowed to submit multiple applications, but it is unlikely that subsequent applications will get approved if it's the same entities involved and they're doing the same sort of the exact same activities. And so, and Lenny, you're clarifying that you have a site that works both for solar as affordable housing. The grant funding for this would be focused on the solar and or storage. It would not, it's not intended to support the development of housing itself. How early in the process does a project need to be in order to apply for New York-Sun? So it's well, and I want to answer this question two ways. I guess if they're, in order to apply for, so when you're saying New York-Sun, I'm thinking of the standard New York-Sun incentive rebate, which is available for all new grid connected solar projects. That's a fairly mature stage in order to apply for the New York-Sun rebate. You essentially need to have all, I mean, I guess that the full list of requirements are in our Edison and upstate / Long Island program manuals, but it essentially includes all permitting must be done, the system design must be done, and permission to operate or interconnection approval must be completed already. And once you've reached those, I guess that certain documentation, you submit that through the NYSERDA portal, and that's how you get the New York-Sun rebate. But if that question was intended, if you're using New York-Sun sort of as a substitute for this pre-development program, it's specifically intended for very early. It could be the earliest possible stage possible. I mean, if you're thinking about, if you are an affordable housing owner or manager and you're thinking about developing a solar and storage project, and say you're a housing authority, you should be thinking of, you can apply for that project right now. I think how I guess what is described in your overall plan, that will impact your stage. For someone who's at the very start of planning process, that's going to be different from someone who has maybe identified a few partners who will be part of the team, who's maybe identified where a project can be built and what would go in the work plan, and the request for funding would sort of flow from there. So New York-Sun, it's a fairly mature requirement for the pre-development program. It's as early as possible wherever you are. So if you've done multiples, the question is, there are multiple small solar projects at some affordable housing providers and want to submit community solar scale project with them. Does it allow for professional engineering firms with past work experience to do? I think the key there is what is the relationship with the affordable housing? If you are an engineering firm and you're seeking to subsidize an installation and try to use the grants to find an affordable housing provider, that's putting the grant program backwards. If however, if there is an affordable housing organization that is looking for a way to do community solar, and they have reached out to you and they are interested in sort of partnering with you, and you can show that that partnership is in place and they are sort of leading this overall grant application, that's more sort of a grant application. But it is not, it's not intended to subsidize the costs of right. It's not primarily intended to subsidize the cost of an engineering firm to go out and find the right affordable housing customers. Is intended to empower affordable housing customers or excuse me, providers or housing authorities or community-based organizations to find whatever type of technical service provider that they think would be necessary, and then for them to sort of lead the process and describe exactly what they want to do. Let's see. You have a site in Buffalo. Would you be qualified? I guess the question is, what's the relationship there between affordable housing to low to moderate income households to disadvantaged communities? If you just have a site and there is no connection, and that site is not already affordable housing, then that doesn't meet that baseline criteria that this is intended to focus on affordable housing and to drive that development and empower those organizations to find, I guess, whatever sites. Having said that, I guess this is the thing that maybe, or it sounds like I'm jumping around here, but if there is an affordable housing organization or a community organization that works closely with low to moderate income households in Buffalo, and they are looking for a site, they have the customers, they have the community, they're looking for ways to creatively provide benefits to disadvantaged community, to environmental justice community. They may identify your property in Buffalo as the place where they want to work for a site. And so if they submitted an application and you were there was a letter of support where you said, oh yes, this is we've committed this property for that development. Again, because it's being led by the affordable housing entity, the disadvantaged community, because it's being led by that's closer to an eligible application. But just having the site alone without that connection to affordable housing or low to moderate income households, that is not meeting the minimum eligibility. Homes are owner occupied, but sold to low to moderate income homeowners under a program managed by one of these organizations. So that's potentially eligible. I mean, you don't see that as much in the Con Edison region, but some different areas in the state, there's an organization that is sort of, managing homes, or they have criteria in place where they're only selling homes to low to moderate income homeowners. And so they have this sort of portfolio that they're very familiar with, that they have access, they have direct connections to, where there are a number of low to moderate income households. And so if that entity is seeking to figure out, how could we install solar storage on all of these owner occupied residences that are all low to moderate income, all 80% area median income or below. We know where they are. We're seeing if we could do, is it possible for us to install solar? How would that work? How would this be financed? What is the ownership structure? Because this is maybe a little bit unique. And how would you perform the outreach to these customers? That would be, I think, a very interesting pre-development application. It would just, I guess it's going to depend on the involvement on that, I guess, whatever that organization that was managing those homes that are sold to the LMI homeowners. John, if you want to send me an email afterwards, I can answer more questions about that. But I think we intentionally made this a more expansive sort of definition of what affordable housing is, because depending on where you are in the state of New York, the organizations and the structures of housing can look very different. And it's not just, I guess it's intended to support this development on these organizations that are managing affordable housing, regardless of how those buildings end up looking. If that's a large master metered multifamily housing building, that's great. If it's 40 single family LMI households that are in in the Finger Lakes region, then also that's also eligible. That's also great. It's a great question. Subscriber organization. If the subscriber organization, that could be, you could think of that as a technical service provider. If you're, I guess if you do not have that direct connection to affordable housing, to managers of affordable housing. If you're not already working, or I guess if you're not already working with low to moderate income households, then it is absolutely necessary to establish that partnership, that relationship before an application gets submitted. But I guess if it's a subscriber organization, presumably working with a community solar project, you know, that on its face does not sound eligible for a pre-development grant. That I could see that sort of organization being part of a project that would receive other support from NYSERDA in other ways. Subscriber organizations are a key part of the Inclusive Community Solar Adder. And so they could be involved in a project that is seeking that funding. That adder focuses on community solar projects wherever they may be located that are providing a minimum allocation of total capacity as well as a minimum amount of benefits. Looking at least a 20% bill discount to low to moderate income households in disadvantaged communities. There's that could potentially be eligible for a grant application, but a subscriber organization alone that doesn't meet that, doesn't sound that minimum criteria. It's a good question. A project that's participating in Expanded Solar for All, would it qualify for the organization? I mean, I guess the question there would be, if a project has bid into Expanded Solar for All and they've committed their community solar project to participating, then they're allocating benefits to keep customers in that is a home energy assistance program and the national grid service territory. And so if that project capacity is committed to that, it's unclear how then that project is a key part of an affordable housing organization that is seeking funding under this program. I'm struggling to think of a way in which you would be able to do both as a practical matter. And so I don't think we haven't written into our rules that it's explicitly that's not allowed. I think it's far more likely that a project that is seeking funding or additional funding under the Inclusive Community Solar Adder could also be part of the pre-development program, and we have rules in place for that essentially, if you're seeking the Inclusive Community Solar Adder for a project and you're also seeking to be, pre-development funding, you're going to need to show that you have a higher level of benefits from that community solar project. But the Expanded Solar for All, it doesn't seem like a necessary, or those sort of community solar projects likely wouldn't be a good fit for, sort of the projects that would get involved in there, especially because, they're likely already built. Question, what about customers aggregated by an existing home performance, LMI home performance contractor working extensively through Empower or Assisted Home Performance? I think I would step back and say that I think it's, again, you're looking at a manager of different affordable housing properties. If there is a contractor that is working with a manager of a portfolio of single family LMI homes that they're participating in the Assisted Home Performance Program, that's one thing, but I think the focus under the pre-development program would be, all right, well, what is going to be the solar storage project that is going to be built here? What is the organization that is managing the affordable housing? How are they involved in this overall grant application? That would be the primary assessment there. And I guess if there was, maybe the only way in which I think they would the Empower participation, assisted home performance participation, might be relevant. It's just in terms of the overall description that, we're looking at developing solar projects, and, we're also working on other energy efficiency focused projects as well. That could be relevant in the grant application. But for the pre-development, that the focus is going to be, what's the affordable housing organization? Who are the LMI customers or our households, and what will those benefits to them be? Otherwise, there's all of those projects who are eligible for ongoing funding. The affordable solar residential incentive, which that was previously mentioned here, that's the 80 cents a watt incentive. Then in the upstate Con Edison region, it's 40 cents a watt. In the Long Island region, those projects are at an ongoing basis, regardless of participation in the pre-development program, they're still eligible for that funding. And that was sort of implied earlier. Regardless of pre-development funding, the multifamily affordable housing incentive would be applicable for any regulated multifamily housing project. So there's a tier of NYSERDA subsidies, incentives, that rebate. All of those apply, and you can get that in addition to a pre-development grant. The pre-development grant is really focused on, or it's supposed to be, or intended to focus on the planning, the early stage planning process. Or, is this something that you think that your organization can do in the first place? Do you think that there's a model or a business model here? And my email address is, hopefully folks can see that on the screen, but it's christopher.rogers@nyserda.ny.gov. It's my first and last name. I'm pausing there. I'm not seeing, Dylan, I don't know if you've got any other separate questions that have been directed to you.
No, nothing else.
Then I say we'll give it a few minutes just to see if absolutely. So we upload both the recording and the slides, and that's on there. There is a separate web page for the pre-development program, and so you can click through. I don't know how far back the recordings go. You can click through a decent amount of those. You can see them. I think we might have gotten rid of some older ones, and we kept some ones that had some critical information in there. So I don't think all of them are still available. But yes, this will be, both the slides will be downloadable and the recording will be available to go back through. So I would encourage you to share with your colleagues that that are interested. The URL for that. Sure. So just threw that in there. There's also a link on that website. That's where there's the official solicitation announcement, where you can find all of the attachments that are used for the program. As far as an email alert, Dylan is fantastic about, if you have signed up if you're already getting email notifications from NYSERDA via solar announcements, and you got the announcement for for this email, there is a thank you that goes up afterwards, and so that that's would be the alert for that. And Dylan, thank you for highlighting. If you are not getting these emails, then you'll need to navigate to the contact us page, and then you sign up for that, and then you'll get all the announcements related to this program initiative, but also more broadly the solar energy equity framework. So that includes the inclusive community solar adder, which is sort of touched on, expansive solar for all, which could be very relevant for folks who are developing larger scale commercial projects, across the state that are looking into participating in that program. That includes the single family and multifamily incentives. It includes this program now, and it would include any future programs that are also focused on disadvantaged communities and low to moderate income households. And so it, again, we'll be sure to make the announcement, after this goes out. But next slide. I think this is just more, showing what it looks like. Make sure that you may have signed up and you may be missing these messages if those are getting filtered out. But I hopefully we'll get these out as soon as possible. If you have any follow-up questions that weren't covered in this webinar, please feel free to reach out to me afterwards, and I can try to provide any clarity there. With that, we can give back the last 7 minutes before the hour and enjoy your afternoon.